Welcome to the Mastermind for Business podcast. This podcast is for you if you are a small business owner that just feels a bit enslaved to your business. We're going to show you a whole bunch of really simple tips and tricks that will get you more freedom and as a result, more time and more money. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how you take your greatest strength and stop it from becoming your greatest weakness. Let's get that underway right now.
If you want more time, money, freedom, and have a business that's not reliant on you, then you're in the right place. Each week, Mark Creedon, along with some of the very best business minds in the world, will take you through simple, practical steps you can take to create the business you always wanted. From his own practical experience, Mark will show you how to work less, make more, and get the business you always wanted, the one that you deserve. Now here's your host, one of Australia's most sought-after business coaches, Mark Creedon.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Mastermind for Business podcast. Nick, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
So, Nick, here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the concept of greatest strength and greatest weakness, because there's a saying, right, that your greatest strength can often be your greatest weakness.
Yep, 100%.
And I'll tell you what got me thinking about it, in fact, was the football. So rugby league is something that we're both interested in.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we are recording this directly after the State of Origin.
Unfortunately, yes.
The end result was that what got me thinking about this was rugby league. So a good mate of mine is an Eels supporter. So to all the Eels supporters out there, hello and commiserations at the same time. But he was just so frustrated. And so I was actually watching an Eels game and Mitchell Moses. Now, one of the things that we know about Mitchell Moses, and I'm sorry, if you're not a rugby league supporter, it's okay. Hang in there. Don't leave us just yet, because
this isn't all going to be
it's not about rugby league.
No.
This is how we're going to go.
We'll get there.
Yeah, 100%. We're going to use this as an example.
Yeah.
So Mitchell Moses. So we know from State of Origin that he's actually a heck of a player.
Yeah.
Right? He's got some skills. But at the club level, he has, in most recent times, shown an enormous amount of frustration. Right?
Yep, I would say that's fair.
And so what leads to that frustration? You've played rugby league. What leads to that frustration? Where do you think that frustration came from for him?
When things aren't going your way.
Right. So the team's not winning, things aren't going his way, things aren't working out the way they should. From his point of view, his teammates aren't maybe stepping up the way they should be.
Yeah, sure. And I think, you see what happens in training. You put all of the practice in and it's all working. It's all, you're being cohesive. Everything's happening in the training. Fine, working. But then when it comes to the game, sometimes that doesn't always go to plan. Right.
So the thing about frustration for me is I think frustration really only comes about if you're passionate.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're passionate about something and it's not going according to plan, that can be incredibly frustrating. And so I've been watching Mitchell Moses and I've gone, on the one hand, when I see him frustrated, I go, I love that, because as I've often said, I won't apologize for being passionate. Right, I'm passionate about things I do in my life. I'm passionate about my business. I'm passionate about my family, passionate about my team. I won't apologize for that.
Sure.
But it's kind of a fine line, because what I've seen in Mitchell Moses, for example, is I think there's a risk that his passion has turned into frustration, which then has a negative impact.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those things where I guess if it's used against you, it can then turn to frustration, right? It can then turn to those anger and stuff like that.
Yeah, right. And so let's take this away from sport for a minute now, and let's talk about business. If you are running a business or you are running a division within a business and you're really passionate about it and you love what you're doing, but it's just not going right, and when you look around, you start to blame the people around you because you can see that they're not, in your view, they're not stepping up.
Yep.
So now we've got this great passion. The reason that you're pissed off, you're frustrated, is because you've got the passion. Now you start blaming those people. So that passion turns to frustration.
Yes.
So that passion, which was probably a great asset that got you to a particular point, got you to a point in growth, got you to a point of advancement or revenue, whatever it might be, is now potentially undermining all of that by undoing that work. Because if you were in, now let's take it back to a sport, if you were in a team, let's say in your younger days.
Team environment.
Right, team environment. You were captain of your team a few years running.
Yep.
If as the captain, you turned that passion into frustration and started berating the boys that you were playing with all the time, what do you think would have been the impact? What do you think would have been the outcome of that?
Well, they all turn on each other.
Right.
Everyone turns on each other. Right?
Yep. That's right.
Then it's every man for themselves, and you're no longer a cohesive, moving team.
Right. So the thing that I've seen and I've certainly seen leaders turn on their team, right? They get frustrated.
Definitely.
And it's okay. It's okay to get frustrated because
Because you're passionate, right? You care.
Yeah, 100%. That's your passion. That's your passion. You care.
Yeah.
But when you turn that passion into frustration, into kind of blaming
Yeah, anger and 100%.
and blame.
Yeah.
And so I think it does two things. One, I think you're right. I think once you start blaming, it turns people potentially against each other.
Yeah, it does.
Right? And it removes that team cohesiveness.
Yep.
Yeah. But the other thing I think you run a risk of doing is failing to stop and turn the spotlight inwards. Now, you know more about the technical aspects of rugby league than I do, so I don't know if that's the case for Mitchell. But when I look at it from a business perspective, what I've seen is people start spending so much time blaming everybody else, they forget to actually stop and go, you know what, maybe I'm
the issue. Or and it might not even be that you're the entire issue, but it could be that you're adding to the pot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that there may be something that you might be able to do to it, but do for it
Yeah.
before you go and search for the answer somewhere else. And that's what a true leader is.
Yeah.
Right? A true leader leads by example.
Yep.
Not by
100%.
telling people what to do, telling people where to go. That's not a leader.
Yeah.
Right? A leader is someone who takes the reins, leads by example. Now, if you were to look within and think, hang on, maybe there's something that I could add to the pot to lead by example and show, hey, I'm trying to make a change. I'm trying to be open to adapting and change within my business.
Yep.
Then that's only going to show that passion can be harnessed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. It's a really interesting point. It's disappointing that leadership's not about telling people where to go, because I've told a few people where to go in my time. The thing is that as a leader, I think the risk you run, if you start playing the blame game and you're blaming everybody but yourself, you've stopped being a leader because you've stopped asking yourself and letting your team see that you are prepared to ask yourself, what can I do better? What can I do better? And how can I lead my people? How can I lead my team out of this shit that we're in now? I read this quote the other day from Zig Ziglar, right? Nobody ever climbed Mount Everest by just wandering around. Right. So you don't get to that just by wandering around.
Not going to happen for you.
And I think the same sort of concept applies. If all you're doing is just looking around and you don't actually have a plan and a strategy for how you are going to address the shortfalls. So that's a really nice segue, because when I look at Parramatta, I actually think that when somebody like Mitchell Moses starts moving his passion into frustration, into berating and the blame game, that's the time when the leadership needs to step in.
Well, that's the time when, yes, this is a sport reference, but this works in every section of your life.
Yep.
But that's the time when, that leadership needs to be experience. It needs to come from experience.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You think some of the most, I guess, experienced, if we're talking about Parramatta, some of the most experienced players needed to step up then.
Yep.
Right? Because they've been there before.
Yep.
They've done this sort of stuff. And is experience not, going through things and then learning, adapting, and knowing that the way you did it the very first time was not the right way. Right?
It is. That's exactly what it is.
So I guess in those moments, and I think talking about rugby league again, but I think, back to the Broncos a few years ago.
Yep.
Right? And they were definitely a really, really young team.
Yep.
Right? Lacked experience. Their captain at the time was Alex Glenn, who probably wasn't necessarily the first person you would pick for a job if it was another team,
Yep.
but he was the most experienced.
Right.
Right? He was the only player who had over 200 caps or something like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No other player was close to him. They
Yep.
were all in their early 20s.
Yep.
They were all only played a handful of NRL games together. So the best person to lead them through those times was the most experienced person. So
Yep.
that's when that experience needs to come through. Now, if you're really experienced and you're in a leadership position, that's your time to step up.
Yep.
When everything is failing and the heads are going down, everyone feels like maybe it's not a solvable problem.
Yep.
Maybe the problem is too big
we're
to
doomed.
be solved, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's when that experience needs to come in and go, guys, we will get through the other side of this.
Yep. Yeah. And I think about, if you're looking at, say, in a business sense, if you find that your passion for your business or your passion for your business unit is turning into frustration and starting to creep into the blame game, then I guess taking what you're saying is, well, you know what? Now's the time, rather than just sort of running this scattergun approach of blame, to actually go out to your most experienced people and say, guys, I really need your help so that we can lead us out of this.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I think that's really key as well, is the language used there that you've used of we.
Yep.
I think a lot of the times in a leadership position, we feel like because we're the manager or because we're the leader of a certain section or a leader of a project, whatever it is, that we're solely in charge of this.
Yep.
But there's other people that are responsible for it happening too,
100%.
right?
Yep.
And if they don't feel like they're in charge of any of it, and that they're responsible for any of it,
Yep.
and that all of that falls on your shoulders,
Yep.
why would they ever put the effort in?
Yeah, that's
why
right.
would they ever help you?
We're all in this together, all for one for all. It's interesting because I actually just saw very recently a situation in one of the companies that we're working with in our mastermind program where the leader was in this position, but their view was, right, well, in order to get us out of this shit, I'm going to take everything back, right? As opposed to going out to the really experienced people around you and going, no, do you know what? Guys, can you help me?
I need you to step up for me, guys.
Yeah, can you help me so that
all
we
need to
can?
step up.
Yeah. Hey, another sporting reference, and I know you haven't watched this, but you really must, and that's Ted Lasso,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
You knew where I was going. So there's this great episode of Ted Lasso where the captain of the team, Roy Kent, is having a shocking couple of games. And so the two sort of assistant coaches come into Ted and almost pull a mutiny and go, for the next game, you have to bench Roy Kent.
Right.
You have to bench him. He's having horrible games. And Ted goes, yep, takes it on board. And they actually sort of get really shitty with him that he won't. And then finally he comes to them and goes, thank you guys. I really value your input. I love the fact that you can come and challenge me on this, but I'm not benching Roy Kent. And there's one reason and one reason only. He is the most experienced person on our team.
We need him out there.
We actually need him out there. And the other thing he says is that if I talk to Roy and build him up and explain that to him, that's more important than anything that happens on a patch of grass.
And you're going to get more out of him.
Right.
If you kick him down, you kick him to the bench.
Yep.
You say, hey, you're not doing your job properly, I'm going to take it back.
Yep.
Right, I'm going to take it off you, whatever it is.
Yep.
That's only going to dampen their spirit. It's only going to dampen their motivation.
Yep.
It's not going to get the best out of them at all.
So it's a great analogy, really. I mean, one of the things I love about guys, if you haven't watched Ted Lasso, it's on Apple TV.
I haven't spent the time, but I have heard, and I've seen a few clips, but I've heard some really great stuff.
It just teaches you
relatable.
so much. Oh, absolutely, about life, about business. But it's a great example where if you, as a leader, you go, oh, you know what, they're not doing the job, I'm just going to take it back.
Yeah.
So if you'd benched Roy Kent, now what happened was they went out and won the game because he said to Roy Kent, you know what, you deserve to be benched on your performance, but I'm not going to bench you because I believe in you.
Yep.
And you know how to do this because you are the most experienced player.
Rely on you.
These guys, they look to you, mate.
Yeah.
They look to you. And so, I've seen it in business again where somebody's going, well, they're not doing their jobs, I'm just going to take it back. And I go, that is not the answer.
No.
The answer is to go to them and go, do you know what? You're not performing at the level you need to be. How can I help you to get there? What can we do together?
Sometimes people lose confidence,
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
in anything.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, let's be honest. This is not all, hugs and kisses and, singing Kumbaya around the campfire. The reality is some people are not going, they're just not going to step up.
No, not at all.
And
no
they
matter
never
how
will, 'cause-
much you give them.
Right, because they don't want to.
No.
But if you've got an experienced person that has performed well,
Before.
they're in a leadership position and they that they know how to, and they're just having a rough
slump,
time of it.
right?
They're in a slump, right? In a form slump.
Yep.
Then it is your job as a leader, I think, to help them turn their greatest strength back on again.
Yeah, 100%, and utilize it. You know, I think like anyone, I think everyone goes through a slump,
Yep.
right? Even the best of us.
Yep.
So you're right. The job of a leader is to then turn that around
Yep.
and get the best out of them again.
Yeah, 100%. We were talking before about passion, because the reality is that, and greatest strength and greatest weakness. So someone who's really good at what they do and they've performed really well, that's a strength. But their ability to perform and their belief and therefore their passion can also be a weakness if they are in a slump.
Yep.
Because as I've often said, if I'm not performing, nobody will berate me more than me.
Yep.
Right? Nobody will berate me more than me. Nobody will be as hard on me as I am on myself. So my strength at being, I think, resourceful and resilient and all that sort of stuff, and the ability to move forward and make things happen is because of my self-belief and passion. That's a strength, but it's also a weakness if it starts to wane,
Yeah.
right? Because then I start to diminish my self-belief.
Yeah, which is, I think it happens a lot.
Yeah, it
It
does.
happens very often.
It does. And so the job, certainly in business, which is what this is all about, so, if you're in a position where you're looking at your business now and you say, that person's just not stepping up and they're so used to, the answer is not to bench them. The answer is not to take their job off them. The answer is certainly not to take the job back yourself.
No.
But the answer is to have that conversation with them about how do we get you back to where you used to be?
Yep.
And frankly, where you deserve to be.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, when you see any great leader, people want to follow them. All the great leaders, people
Yep.
want to follow them.
Yep.
So if you're to expect to get the best out of people, then you've got to be able to have that connection with them,
Yeah, you do.
to be able to sit down and have that conversation.
Yep.
So you're right. Having that conversation is key, but I think the key is also having that connection
Yep.
with your staff.
Yeah.
And being, open enough with
Yep.
your staff. And it goes back to, leading by example. Now, if you're not open to change, if you're not open to new ideas and to adjustments or a different way of looking at things,
Yep.
then if your way is the highway, all that sort of stuff, then you can't expect to build a connection with your staff and then expect to get the best out of them.
No.
It's just you have to lead by example in every way to expect them to do the same thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've done a couple of leadership courses with my mate Mick Donalds from the Special Forces, the SAS, and Mick talks about those very simple things, leaders doing the simple things like leading by example, leaders eat last, all of those sorts of things. And it's amazing when you put it into, by the way, putting that into practice is so much easier than you might at first think.
Yeah, it's not that hard, is it?
No, it's not. It really isn't that hard. It's just a matter of thinking about it. But as I've watched, and I've taught those things to other people and watched people do that, and they lead by example. So when they see someone on their team who's really good at what they do and they're in a form slump, they go, rather than going, hey, I'm going to take this off you, they go, hey, do you know what? Let's do this together.
Yep.
Let's do this together and let's push forward and watch them come out the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Or, Nick, they're not going to come out the other side,
No,
right?
that's right.
In which case you can go hand on heart, I've done everything I can. Time for me to bench them now.
100%.
Or they'll bench themselves.
Well, that's what I was about to say. A lot of the times that's what happens.
Yeah.
They put themselves in that position.
They'll realise.
Yeah. And I feel like, the average person would pick up on those sort of signs.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And I think, like going back to footy, I think if they're that much of a disturbance to the cohesiveness of the rest of the team,
Yep.
right? No matter how hard you work, no matter how much you put into it, how much effort you put into it, if they're that much of a disturbance to the rest of the team, then it's not worth spending any more time or effort trying to bring them back to their previous glory or wherever they were.
100%. 100%. But that's a really interesting point. That's a really, really interesting point. I had a client that I worked with coaching a number of years back, and we were talking about they had this great performing salesperson.
Yeah.
But as one of the directors described, they said, look, he's a really great salesman. He's just a really horrible human being, right?
I've met a few of those, I reckon.
Yeah. Really horrible human being. And so the issue they had is that the managing director said, I want him to stay because he's producing amazing numbers. All of the other directors were going, man, he's just got to go.
Yeah.
He's just got to go because basically he's a really shitty person. And so he's impacting all of the morale.
Sure.
Now, what was really interesting is the MD's decision prevailed.
Right.
When the guy finally left, and I was only having this conversation with the MD earlier this week. When the guy finally left, the MD said to me, you know what I've realised is that the financial benefit I had from having him here was great, but the cost of having him here was greater.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise it until he walked out the door. And I looked back at all the good people I had lost who left because they just couldn't work with shithead,
It's just not worth it.
right? They couldn't work with, and I look at all the, and even junior people who had great potential. So all the potential that walked out the door because I was just focused on the dollars.
And that happens all the time, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see people that are, I guess, the top gun, but they don't know how to behave or work in a team environment.
That's right.
It's the same thing going back to footy. If there's a star player, thinks he's the everything.
Yep.
As if the team are going to, put up with that.
No, at the end of the day.
You're going to get 12 good players leave.
Yep.
And be left with one really good player.
Yeah, really,
What's the sense of that?
really important lesson.
Yeah.
Let's talk about taking action. We've covered off on the concept of, greatest strengths, greatest weaknesses, and where a leadership's role, sits, where the leader's role sits in that. What I really want to talk about is taking action and procrastination. So I asked this question of every Friday, we have a Friday focus session with our mastermind members. And I asked this question last week and I said, just a quick show of hands, who is guilty of procrastinating, right? Now, they're all really honest people, so they all put their hand up. Do you procrastinate?
I think I'm probably one of the worst procrastinators. Is that a word, procrastinator?
Yeah, it is, procrastinator.
I almost got the thesaurus out. Procrastinator, yeah, I definitely do. I'm very, very guilty of it.
What would you say if I said I could fix that for you right now?
Mate, I'd be cheering.
Yeah. Let's see how we go. So here's the thing about procrastination. There's a whole bunch of reasons, right, as to why we procrastinate. There's a thing called Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law says, essentially, you will take as long to do something as the time that you're given to do it. Right?
Yep.
So if you've got in your world, which is video directing, right? Because what you do is you're not a videographer, you're a video director.
Yep.
So what you do is you help people you don't just record people, but you actually help people to present themselves in the best possible way on camera.
Yep.
And with the best possible content and
tell them how to get the best story out.
And tell great stories.
Deliver it in the best way possible.
Yeah, cool. So that's the fun part of what you do.
100%.
The non-fun part of what you do is the editing that creates that.
Sitting behind the screen for 12 hours
Yep.
a day.
But there would be editing jobs that you would put off.
Oh, definitely.
And if I gave you a deadline of, Nick, I need that edited product by next Tuesday, you'll stay up Monday night finishing it.
Sometimes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah,
I did the same thing at uni. When I first went to uni, I was 20. All of my assignments were done a few days before they were due. All of my study was crammed. And when I went back to university when I was 40, I thought, I'm not going to do that.
You still did.
I still did it.
Yeah.
Still did it. So Parkinson's law, right? If I had 2 weeks to do an assignment, I'd do it in the last 2 days.
Yep.
So there's a couple of ways that you can stop doing that. And there's kind of three hints I've got for you.
Okay.
The first one is to not think short term. So short-termism.
Right.
Thinking short term is, shit, I've got to spend 12 hours doing that editing.
Yes.
Long term is, if I spend 12 hours doing that editing, I'm going to make this amount of money from it. And with that amount of money, because we know the money is not a motivator in itself, with that amount of money, I'm going to be able to take the kids to movie world, or do you know whatever the sort of the motivation
Achieve
might
something.
be.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's first of all the first thing is to think about to remove the short-termism.
Right.
And so what you can think of is two things. One, what is the inaction costing me?
Mm-hmm.
What's it costing me by not doing that? What's it depriving me of? So if I try and jam all this into one as opposed to doing it over time, it means that I'm not available for my kids, or I might miss out on something I really like to do, or,
Yep.
I can't do certain things.
Sure.
So number one is the cost of inaction, and then to think about in terms of short-termism, removing the short-termism and going to long-term, what's the benefit of it? That's the first step.
Mm-hmm.
The second step is, in line with that, is to break it into chunks. So doing an edit, a full edit,
Yep.
is a 10-hour project,
Sometimes, yeah.
right? Like if you said to me, Mark, you got to sit down and do 10 hours, I'd go, you're kidding me. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yep. Daunting prospect.
yeah. I mean, somebody sitting there saying, Mark, you've got to attend a meeting for people put a meeting in my calendar and they go, oh, it'll take 2 hours. I go, man,
No.
no,
No, thank you.
I don't want to sit in a meeting for 2 hours. Like, that's just really daunting.
Sure.
But what I would do is I'd say, do you know what, rather than you got a lot to go through, so we've got a 2-hour meeting. Hey, how about we do this? How about we do 4 30-minute meetings? Right?
Yep.
That now becomes a whole lot more palatable to me.
Sure.
So if you were to take your 10 hours and go, I'm going to do 5 lots of 2 hours, and you lock them into your calendar, you preload
Accountable
them.
for
We've
it.
spoken about preloading for it.
Yes.
So the concept is breaking it down,
Mm-hmm.
right? The third thing is, and this I got from, in the 1920s, Nick, there was a,
When you were a young bloke. Or?
yeah, when I was a young bloke, yeah, you'll keep. In 1920s, there was a psychologist by the name of Zygurnik. She was a Russian psychologist, and she went to a cafe in Paris, I think it was. Anybody listening that knows more about this than me, please forgive me, but I'm pretty sure she was in a Parisian cafe.
Okay.
And what she noticed is that the waiters were all taking orders, but not writing them down. But they were getting them right. And if you went to the waiters and said to them before they had fulfilled the order, asked them, what did that person order, they'd be able to tell you. But once the order was delivered,
It's gone.
if you asked them 20 minutes later, what did that person order, they couldn't tell you. And so she took that back to the psychological lab. She did a bunch of research. I'll cut to the chase. Essentially what it was that an unfinished project is like a stone in your shoe. And so you will remember it and you will want to get rid of the stone in your shoe.
Yep.
Whereas if it's a project that hasn't been started, it's not a stone in your shoe. So in other words, they were able to forget things because they were finished. They able to get them out of their mind
Right.
because they were finished. But they kept in their mind the things that they had started. So where they'd started an order, but the process hadn't been finished, was still paramount in their mind.
Okay.
Right. So the concept is, and she went back and did this research she got people to complete some puzzles. So what she did, she got a couple of groups. Some of the groups, she gave them a puzzle and they had to finish it, and asked them some period of time later about the puzzle they couldn't remember.
Okay.
Some people, she got them to start the puzzle but deliberately stopped them. Asked them about it, it was still in their mind and they wanted to go back and work out how to finish it. So the concept of they had a desire to go back and finish it, the procrastination had been removed because they had started it. So this is her theory.
Okay.
The theory is if you make a start on something, you are more likely to remove the procrastination about that thing and actually go back and do it than if you don't make a start.
Makes sense. Like I can see where, like how that would happen. Yeah, for sure.
So Professor Richard Wiseman from University of Hertfordshire, what he says, his interpretation of that, he might have mentioned coined the stone in the shoe term, but his interpretation of that is if you have something that you're putting off, just do 5 minutes of it,
Yep.
right? Just do 5 minutes of it. And you know what? If I think back, there's been a few things that you and I have been working on, or even for you personally, you're going, I really need to get that. I really need to get the car sorted out. Yeah, put it off. But the minute you actually start the process, even if you don't finish it, now that you've started it, you want to finish it.
Yeah, you sort of feel like you have to, right?
Yeah. So the answer to that is making a start. So the three things we said was, you need to break it down into chunks.
Yep.
You need to have a plan for it. But the third thing, and the most important thing, is really just this: you actually make a start. So if you've got something,
started on it.
Yeah, get started.
Yeah.
Get started. So break things down. That's how you're going to do things. You got a 10-hour job, break it into 5
Break it
2-hour
up
jobs.
if you can.
Yep. Get it preloaded, and set yourself some timeframes for that. But the big thing is actually to get a start.
Yep. Yeah. I can definitely see there's a lot of things I think where, you're right, where you say you leave it to the last minute.
Yeah.
You start at the last minute and then you only have the tiny little window to complete it.
You jam it in.
Where if you started it maybe 4, 5 days before that,
Yep.
then you would have revisited it before that last little section that you had left.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that definitely has some value, just at least, even like you said, even if it's not doing the whole thing, it was completing it right there, but at least getting a start on it.
Yeah.
So then you can work on it before you probably would have.
Yeah, and the other thing too is I find that often projects, we sort of underestimate the amount of time.
Oh, that's me.
Yeah.
In a nutshell. The amount of times I go, I reckon that'll take me about 5 hours roughly. And then you got to do it. It's a 10-hour job.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got, 3 times a year we have an intensive where we get all our members from around the country and overseas, and they meet on the Gold Coast, and we actually work on some things in their business. And so, there's a lot of preparation that I put into, because it's a 2.5-day event.
Definitely.
And I sat down the other weekend and I actually said to Caroline, I'm just going to do this final prep for the intensive that's upcoming. She went, okay. It was a Sunday, and she said, how much time do you need? I went, I reckon it'll take me 2 hours. Right. So I kicked off later than I should have. I made all the classic errors. I didn't get started.
Yep.
I finally got started about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, thinking I'll finish about 3 or 4 in time for a 4 o'clock game.
Yep.
I'll light the fire pit. I'll sit outside and watch the game on the telly, maybe have a beer or a Gentleman Jack or something. Mm-hmm. So 6 o'clock, I'm still working on this goddamn thing. Yeah.
I do that all the time too.
Yeah.
I think this might not be for everybody, but something that I do is I'm a really visual person.
Yep.
So if I write down my everything,
yep.
I write down, okay, so between this time and this time,
yep.
I've designated myself to do this.
Yep.
If I've got it in my calendar, whatever it is. But then, we've spoken about preloading and stuff before, but then also go, well, when I've finished this, no matter where I'm at with this, at this time, I'm shutting off and I'm going to go play a game with Eloise, or I'm going to go for a walk with my kids.
Yep.
Whatever it is.
Yep.
And although my brain, because it's so hard to stop something when you're right in the middle of it,
yep.
right? Really, really hard. You got the flow
in the flow.
in momentum.
Yep.
Extremely hard. But what I found is mentally I'm so much better for it if I do.
Yeah, you are.
Because if I go all the way those next 3 hours, so say I've got 3 p.m. cut off,
yep.
I'm going for a walk.
Yep.
I'm taking the kids to the park or something.
Yep.
If I don't stop at 3 and I just go, I just need to get this done. I need to get through it. I don't stop. I don't finish until 6. The house is chaos.
Yep.
Dinner needs to be done now.
Yep.
I've missed out on that time. I don't feel good for taking that time to do that.
Berating yourself because you didn't take the time that you should have taken.
And now that's going to be, even if it's something small, like, you're going to take the time to, shave your legs, whatever it is. Now you've got to do that tomorrow. I mean, not that I shave.
Do you shave your legs every day? Or?
I mean, can you tell?
if that's shaved legs, mate, you need a new razor.
Yeah, that's every day.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? So I think if you don't take that time, if you don't designate that time to actually do that, you're only letting yourself down. And then it becomes, the next day becomes harder. So the day after that becomes harder than that.
Yeah, in fact, you said this may not be for everybody, but there is actually a whole bunch of research that supports what you just said. And that is that you set yourself a dedicated time. So you know that I've got a timer on my desk.
Yes.
And so for me, real simple things like emails, I set myself a time and I race the timer. But at the end of the timer, I stop doing what I'm doing.
No matter what.
Correct. And because what that does is it just fits back into what we were talking before about procrastination. Because whilst I might go, I could have got that finished, I go, do you know what? It's okay. It's an unfinished project. It's a stone in my shoe. I'm going to come back to it. But at least I've made a start. And the thing is, when I come back to it, and often I'll then look at it with fresh eyes.
Yes.
And it takes me, so you talked about finishing at 3 and working till 6. it takes me less than that 3-hour time frame to finish it because I'm not devoting part of my brain space, it's the technical term, I'm not devoting part of that brain space to going, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. So you're almost double thinking, driving around 1 foot on the brake, 1 foot on the accelerator, as Michael Yardney says. So I'm not doing that by going, oh, I know I've got to do this, but I should be doing this and I should be doing that, but I still need to do this. Instead, I'm going, well, do you know what? I've allocated some time for it. Now I'm going to finish it off. And so that what would have taken you 3 hours to finish that job from 3 to 6 probably takes you about 2.
Yeah. And I think, like anything with most tasks, I don't know about everyone else, but I usually do the relatively easy things first, the easier sort of tasks.
Yep.
So then when you stop and you look at it, you go, oh, well, I've done this, this, and this.
Yep.
I can come back to it. And although it may be the hardest part of it, but you've already done a good chunk.
Exactly.
You've already ticked off those things.
Yep.
So now you just need to focus on the other part of it or whatever it is.
Yep.
It's nowhere near as bad as having to do it on the night before the assignment is due.
Yeah, exactly.
Type stuff.
Exactly. There's a couple of schools of thoughts, and we'll talk about that in another episode about eat the frog or look for the small wins, but we'll talk about that in an upcoming episode. Yep. Hey, mate, always good to chat.
Thank you.
These are the things that we work with our clients on in our Mastermind Business Accelerator program. If you are in small business and you just feel like you're trapped and the business isn't, the reason you started in the first place was so you'd have all the freedom and the ability to do your own thing, and you're not doing things. You're not taking the kids to the park. You're not spending time with your partner. You're not doing the things you'd love to. metropolemastermind.com.au. We'd love to be able to help you to get that time back. Nick, if people enjoyed the podcast, they should like it.
100%. Share it with their friends.
That's right. And if they didn't like it, they should share it anyway, because why should they be the only ones to suffer?
Yeah, that's right.
Share it with your friends. Subscribe helps other people to find us. And we look forward to chatting to you next time in the Mastermind for Business podcast. Until then, please make sure you spend time with those who matter most. At the end of the day, it's why we do what we do. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, guys.